gentlemen. We are at the Linux Peter Conference number 4 in St. Petersburg, Russia. I am Vasily Tolstoy, the member of the programming committee of the conference, and together with me is the person with the mysterious name.
SVA.
And the name is SVA. Hi.
Hi.
And my first question would be just this one. You really like to be called like that?
I want to be like what?
Like that? SVA?
Yeah, sure. It's I have the slide in my talk when I introduce myself that I use SVA as a unique addressing in internet and web, and I carry this name since the 90s. And the one issue is as well that my real name, my legal name, which is on my passport, is also a unique ID. So whatever I do on my legal name on the internet will stay there forever, being connected with me. And I mean, it's not that I'm not proud of the things I do, but then I cannot change my legal name. Like, it will always be connected to me. And then another issue is that SVA is like more or less ungoogleable. Like, if you type SVA in a search engine, you find lots of things, but not me. And also, definitely the unique addressing thing is like whatever web service you go, I'll be SVA there. When you go on an IRC server and you query SVA, you reach me. If you go on your email client and you write SVA at whatever entity I'm involved with, then you reach me. So if I would have a business card, which I don't have, everything I have to write on there is those 3 letters.
Yeah. It's a bit, well, someone can say that it's over-paranoid, but I definitely see your point. And
it's also not about paranoia per se, it's also an artist thing.
In the vulgar sense, paranoia,
yeah.
means to be defensive about yourself. The fun thing is that I have a rather close friend who usually uses a nickname which is quite similar to yours, but it's his name compressed. So,
okay.
Slavinsky Vyacheslav Olegovich, hi! And he's SVA with the A in the end.
Okay.
And it's also, it was also a habit of our local well, company of the guys which was beginning to use computers. We use the 3-letter acronyms, and I have myself, 2 of my friends. AV, hi. So it for me it's a quite a warm thing, by the way. So it's like, okay, we were. So you were giving a talk at this conference. Can you say in a few words, if it's possible, what it was about?
So it was about rolling out mass encryption. So I'm here for the pEp Foundation. pEp means pretty easy privacy. So it comes from pretty good privacy, which is an encryption standard on emails since the 90s, early 90s. And we're trying to make that easy. So we developed an architecture of software where we have, at the one hand side, a result which is very easy for users, because nowadays encryption standards are there and they're great and they're working great, but then they are not great to use, and especially not easy. So usually it's like people know about encryption. If it's techies, they would even have installed it, but they barely use it because it's so hard to use. So we are trying to put the easy on the user side, but then also we're trying to put the easy on the developer side. So we want to have mass encryption, which means, like, ideally every communication online, like every written communication online, will be encrypted. So that's not the case, not at all. So what we provide for developers is an easy API to integrate encryption into their software. So if you're developing a software for communication, let's say an SMS app for Android, you can just add encryption that way without you having to bother about encryption, without you having to even know about encryption in detail. All you need to know is you need to care for the interface for our adapter, which then integrates the encryption.
I understand. Actually, people are constantly using the encryption which they don't see. It's SSL.
Yeah.
Everybody who is connecting to the mobile bank or even simpler things.
Yeah.
They're using this, and this is like a standard thing now.
Yeah.
Now it's my local observation. It's difficult to find just by clicking fingers the site which is not HTTPS.
Yeah, but that also just changed in the last few years.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the age before Snowden, there wouldn't have been too many HTTPS sites, and now in the digital age after Snowden, we have, as you're saying, barely any page which doesn't provide HTTPS. And that's also a good example because HTTPS is that the user doesn't even recognize using encryption and still like just browsing and surfing the web. And this is where we also want to have emails, which is where we want to have messages, SMS, everything, that people are just still writing emails and don't even see or feel or have any hassle with the encryption part, which is, some people are really like afraid about this because they say, oh my God, but you cannot push the people into encryption if they don't understand what this is about. Mm-hmm. Because nowadays you still have to understand what's happening with encryption, but this is, we cannot afford to have everyone out there learning about encryption. Because when, like my sister, she's a scout, so at the weekend she's going to the forest with the kids. And I want her to go to the forest with the kids. And I don't want her to sit down and at her laptop the whole weekend to learn this. So I think we just need a shift in in the perception as well, like for us technologists, that like HTTPS, we just need to say, okay, for the masses, we just roll it out like that and they just use it like that without even understanding. And this is particularly for the masses. If someone is like having a real problem and wants to hide something for real, then sure, they need to know much more than just installing some software and using it.
Mm-hmm. I see. Basically, it's a huge topic, which goes to, of course, I highly recommend everyone to look at the record of the presentation when it would be available, to read the presentation, to access your site. I guess we'll have the link somewhere, and learn about the issue, basically. So I just cannot go now in deep detail, but I would love to, especially into the issues of two things: of the hardware encryption, like the last year, probably this, or last 2 years, story about the FBI or National Security Agency, whatever, and the iPhone which they couldn't open, which nobody knows till now, was it a publicity stunt or the real thing? And the other thing is that every government agency wants to certify the security, which means either make it quick or have the backdoor. And this is the case here in Russia, not that strictly enforced. And I understand that it's the case in France, which they also have the very strict legislation. And I think that it also doesn't conform to it, but still it's there, and it's the, I'd say, big stick to hit everyone who the government doesn't like.
Yeah, so hardware encryption is a big topic which we like no one in the world has solved yet. Or like, let's not only say hardware encryption. I mean, you can encrypt your hardware, but then the problem of backdoors, what you just mentioned, where we will never know. Like the only chance you have if you want to take it serious is you just go to a random place you've never been before, and you just totally randomly buy a device. So then at least, like if you're a targeted person, if someone is after you, then you don't, like, it's also important then not to show any sign that you're actually looking for a new device. So you shouldn't check online what do you want and then go into a shop and get it, but just randomly go. But that's a problem which we cannot solve. But I want to mention another problem, the transport. So if we have encryption on email, for example, or an SMS, I still have the problem of transporting that message. So if you write me an email, it can be encrypted or not, but still it's visible for everyone that you wrote me,
Yeah.
that from which place you were sitting at when you wrote me.
Definitely.
How big the email was, like was it short, was it big, were there attachments, and all these things are still leaked. And this is something where we're also trying to give a solution with the help of GNU.net, where I'm giving a lightning talk tonight about GNU.net. I think lightning talks are at 6:30 or something, and I'm sure they're also going to be recorded. And GNU.net is the approach of creating a new internet. It's the tagline, you broke the internet, let's make a GNU one. So I think our listeners know about GNU. Those guys, it's mainly happening in the academic environment. They're rewriting the internet protocols. Because the internet has been invented as oh great, I can access other computers and like you can access mine, this is great. But nowadays you're like, okay, I can access other computers, but they shouldn't access mine. But this is the state we have at the moment. Everything we send through the network is visible for everyone who wants to have access. It's not that everyone can just make click and I can see everything, but then even let's say a educated technical person with a research of maybe a day or two can do that. Like it's not something where you have to study for ages or where you have to have big hardware or something. Like spoofing and listening to other people's communication is pretty easy. So this we also need to solve. Because with encryption, we only solve the body of a message.
Yeah.
But then we also need to have anonymization to solve the problem, who am I talking to? Because this is often much, much more valuable. Especially, like even if I don't see the content, if I see who's talking to each other, I can guess what they're talking about. And then also it's very important for, let's say, groups who are doing something, like who's the spokesperson, who's always replying, who's like in contact with whom, who's close to whom. This is all information I get on the metadata, which encryption doesn't solve.
Yes, you are absolutely right, and I already have a number of not very inspiring stories about how the certain agencies has got all the information they need by just tracking the human metadata, like where you was, with whom you were traveling at the same time, and it comes to very, very definitive picture what was going on, and because as we know, in Russia all the security ends up at the even the government security ends up at the big blah 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 level, and then everything begins to be sold to everybody. So every well-connected security department of a company can got all the information with whom you are connected like 10 years back, not even paying big money, just have the correct connection. And this is very unpleasant because this is, you can even survive with the government interception, but with those guys, and their world is full of security departments, nobody wants to be exposed that much. I'd like to ask you quite a general question, and I understand that this question of the life size. So I would like to hear something quite basic, as the question is. What would you recommend, if there is any recommendation, for the person who lives in the existing world, wants to be at the Facebook, whatever, or connect, chat in the normal messengers and live like everybody lives, to be registered in the list of the parents of the local school and so on, in the local social network, but still not to expose oneself too much.
Keep in mind, like always keeping in mind what environment you're in. Like you're in the middle of the street, everyone's watching you. So if I want to participate, like you just had the example of the parent group of my like kindergarten, and I don't want to be like an outsider there, then just participate, read, and whenever you say something, think twice, think 3 times, think four times what you're saying, what you're posting. Always keep in mind that it's out there forever. So, and then also create different identities. Like with that identity where you're a Facebook user, being a parent, you shouldn't be like the same person, whatever.
I'd like to interrupt at the moment.
Yeah.
So all these social networks, they are really eager. They don't enforce it necessarily, but they really want to make sure that your name is a real name. It's a current trend.
Okay.
We will understand why it's done.
Yeah.
It's not exactly for the, how to say, some hideous reasons, but just to pinpoint ones who speak too much hate speech and to target something business-like.
But then you can still, like if you're on Facebook with your legal name, your legal identity, and your main purpose is to be there as being part of this parent group, then just stick on that purpose. And if you're also into, let's say, gaming, then in the gaming forum, you're another person. No one knows about your kids in the gaming forum, which might be a good idea. But then on Facebook, no one knows about your gaming, like, hobby, right? So that I mean with different identities, having like different places where you are, because that's also pretty important to always keep in mind that I had the slide with the 2 little pigs in my presentation. So there were 2 pigs wondering that they have accommodation for free and they even get food for free. And then the tagline was, if you're not the customer, you're the product being sold. So if you keep this in mind as well, that everything I do, like I'm again in this Facebook group for parental reasons, so then I get advertisements for Pampers and like kid stuff. But then they shouldn't know about my gaming hobby or that I like to drive fast cars, right? Because then my data is more valuable. And to also imagine this a bit better, like back in the old days when there wasn't internet, we had those postcards. Like you went to a shopping mall and there was someone, oh, you want to win a Ferrari? So here, sign this postcard and send it over to us. So the companies were actually spending money worth a Ferrari to get whatever 10,000 of names and addresses. This was the only data they get, and they did spend that much money on it. So nowadays they have to spend much less money to get much more data. So this is why it's often been said that data is the oil of the 21st century. And then people are like, oh, but I don't have anything to hide, and what is my data worth for? So if you imagine back in the old days what companies were actually giving out money to get just the simple data of address and name, then imagine how much data is worth, like how valuable your data is you're giving out right now. So then another thing, because you're asking for recommendation, is like I said, just spread your identities, like keep it simple, keep it focused on the cause. Like if you order something online, okay, those people need to have your address, but do they really need to have your phone number? Like maybe they do because for the postal service,
sometimes.
But then it depends. When you know that my address is super easy to find, just make a typo in your phone number. Like easy, right? So then every time, every data set gets your name, your address, and a different phone number. So then they know, okay, this is not a valid data, so then your data is not as valuable as the data from someone else. So try to make it difficult for the ones collecting your stuff, as difficult as possible, which also means then try to put as much as possible into encrypted channels. If you want to communicate with your family, and you have the choice of using SMS, WhatsApp, or Telegram. Okay, that choice you don't have in Russia, but then let's say Signal. I mean, Signal is still free in Russia?
No, who knows? Actually, Telegram works.
Yeah, okay. Then Telegram.
It's formally forbidden. It's absolutely
yeah,
nice.
Then
Nicely
just,
works.
Yeah, then just use Telegram if you have the choice. And then if you don't have the choice, you can still talk to your family and say, okay, guys, actually we do have the choice. It's just that you guys need to install this now. And then, I mean, it's still not very good because then you're in a closed system again. So you have to convince everyone to use this as well. But then that's still better than everyone being on WhatsApp and again being a data point in the Facebook hemisphere. WhatsApp belongs to Facebook, right?
Great. These things everybody should think about a number of times. And the last question would be, if somebody is thinking of making contribution to the open source security projects and just starting that, what point you'd recommend one to start from? What project to choose, or what?
There are various points to start from. I mean, you can contribute to literally any project in the security scene, because if it's not open source, it's not secure. So whatever is about encryption has to be open source, not necessarily free software, but open source. So here, sure, pick the ones that are free software, not only the ones that are open source. Then, but what I also would like to highlight besides the coding work, because for coding work, just go wherever you feel comfortable. Like whatever project is making you, first of all, which is like speaking your language, your programming language, and which has a good like community environment and whatnot. But then also contribute to events like this, where people get together, where they exchange, to also hold crypto parties. This is very important. There's cryptoparty.in. I actually haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure there isn't anything cryptoparty.in/St. Petersburg. And so hosting a crypto party is pretty easy. All you need to have is a place, which can be your living room, which can be any bar or a university or something, and then you just invite, and then you see who's showing up.